How can we connect the slinky, the nuclear bomb, and baking a cake together? Well, needless to say, it isn't easy. But without the proper scientific processes, none of these things could actually happen. So, what is science? Where does it come from? What does it mean? And seriously, when are we ever going to use this stuff? According to the dictionary, science is the intellectual and practical activity encompassing the systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation and experiment. And if that definition made as much sense to you as it did to me, we might require a little bit more explanation. The word science actually comes from the Latin word scientia, which literally means knowledge. Science, simply put, is the pursuit of knowledge for a reason. As our complicated definition earlier stated, it's not only intellectual, but it's also practical. That means that we're doing this for a reason, because it has always been the human desire to understand this gigantic universe that surrounds us. But a very disconcerting thought is that we can never accept science as absolute truth, because in the bloodthirsty world of science, every scientist is working on being that one person to dismantle these truths that we've come to accept. But maybe, to understand science, we should understand these people that do it. We should understand scientists. The first use of the word scientist actually came in 1834 from William Whewell. But by definition, the first modern scientist could be Charles Darwin with his theory of evolution, or Michael Faraday with his work in electromagnetism and electrochemistry. Some historians argue that people like Plato, Archimedes, or Aristotle were the first scientists, but although these people observed things, a common trait in scientists, they did not conduct experiments to test their observations. These people are what we call philosophers. People who observe but do not experiment. They would rather think about what they observe logically, and if it makes sense in their head, then it must be true. Now, although philosophy is considered the beginning of science, it is not the place where our modern meaning of the word scientist started. Notice how philosophy is actually a branch of science, but unfortunately it can also contribute to pseudoscience, the mistakenly accepted scientific truths. The most dangerous thing about pseudoscience is that it makes sense. People want to believe it because in their heads it makes sense. This is where philosophy takes the downturn. Pseudoscience is actually a lot of fun to talk about because it's the kind of things that we make movies about. We like to read books about it. It's the problem with obsession, actually believing that these things are true. Like the moon landing conspiracy, or aliens, or the Bermuda Triangle. People often like to manipulate science into proving these things true through obscurity, saying that science can't prove aliens don't exist, so aliens must exist. Which science at this time cannot prove or disprove the fact, so it lies in the obscurity of the mind, and in the hands of conspiracy theorists. But if we use the scientific method, the order in which all scientific processes are now done, we don't have to worry about this problem of pseudoscience. Step 1 of the scientific method is to observe. But we've known to observe since the ages of philosophy. It was stopping at the observation stage that created pseudoscience. Step 2. To form a hypothesis. This is done using your observation alongside reason to make an educated guess, which our philosophers also did. But this is generally where they stopped. Step 3. Experimentation, which wasn't really done until many years later because the philosophers' logical explanations were accepted as truth for many years. But in reality, they weren't experimented, they weren't studied, they were lies. Step 4. Analyzing. The reviewing of the results of the experiment to come to a conclusion. And Step 5. The communication of the results. The ancient philosophers actually loved this part. Socrates was known to stand in the town square looking for somebody to start a debate with, so that he could teach them something. As you can tell, it was our ancient philosophers' lacks of step 3 and 4 that actually created most of the pseudoscience that we have now. But as you can see, many of our modern scientists have actually disproved many pseudosciences that our ancient philosophers created, like the geocentric theory, for example, which is the idea that Earth was the center of the universe and everything, which has been now disproved and is now the heliocentric model instead. But we've been working on science for thousands of years. When are we ever going to need this? Well, as famous physicist Carl Sagan once said, we live in a society exquisitely dependent on science and technology, in which hardly anyone knows about science and technology. It's necessary to understand the world that we live in. When we hold our hands on so many billions of scientific processes, when we can look in the mirror and watch our body change, when we're cooking with chemistry, when we're cleaning with physics, when we're eating with biology, we are constantly surrounded by science. It is the unifying factor that connects us all. Thank you, and good day.